Welcome to MMA Fancast. My name is Luke Payson. Welcome back to the show for everybody who's already a subscriber to the channel. If you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe so you can see more great interviews, including the one coming at you right now. Welcoming back on the show a pro heavyweight fighter who I've been covering on MMA Fancast since he was an amateur. My pleasure to welcome back to the show, Raiden Kovacs. Raiden, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, brother. It's good to see you again.
We have talked before. I think the last time you were on, we talked how when I first saw you, you looked maybe 15, 20 years younger. You were not that much younger because you were clean shaven and kind of a crew cut. And
Yeah,
now you've morphed into the woodsman look that you have now, which I think is pretty fantastic. Goes along with being a pro heavyweight. So you've got a fight coming up for Shogun Fights, March
yes, sir.
30th. Your third pro fight. What are your thoughts going into it? How has training been going for you?
Uh, you know, uh, going into this fight, you kind of think there'd be like more pressure or something coming off of a loss, but I think with the time I've kind of put into the sport now, I'm kind of starting to cross over to the Ash just like another fight. I've been doing combat sports for you know, uh 13 or 15 years now. And fighting was a big jump and it was very scary at first. And I put a lot of, I think, undue pressure on myself because I was like, oh, this is different than like a wrestling match or a jiu-jitsu competition or even like a boxing match because this is way scarier and a lot more is on the line, like health wise, and they're going to try to take my head off. And not that like those last things aren't true. There's people are still trying to take my head off, but at the end of the day, it's still a sport, and I've gotten to kind of see that, and the initial scariness of it, and like the anxiety of it has definitely gone down over time. Mostly obviously just because like a lot of my like worst fears have already come true. Like there's been matches where like I've lost and things haven't gone my way, and you kind of get to a certain point where you're kind of like, oh, that's not really that bad. And strangely enough, it's weird. It's almost freeing. You would expect it to be like the opposite, where you're like, oh God, I don't want this to happen again. I'm kind of like, ah, you know what? I've been through it, and at the end of the day, it doesn't really like the result doesn't really change your day to day.
Mm.
Like my training has always been the same, and I've never been one of these guys. It drives me crazy when fighters will do this, where they'll only like train when they got a fight coming up,
Uh,
and hardly in the gym. You know, like I'm somebody who any of my teammates will tell you, my training from like camp time to off time varies, of course, because you got to like be more intense and you got to like make sure your cardio is good and your weight's good and stuff like that. But the time I put in, it's a very small difference because this is something I actually enjoy doing. So for me, training pretty really revolves around, it's pretty much the same. In terms of, I guess, like frequency and like how much. Obviously, like the type of training like varies. Like I try more experimental stuff when I'm not in fight camp. When I'm in fight camp, I'm doing more sparring, I'm doing more like cardio work, I'm doing more like dieting stuff, yada yada. But for me, it's I think my trainer and I say it best, or it's like it's just another day in the office to me at this point. So that's kind of how I look at it now, which doesn't sound as like glamorous and like spectacular that you'll hear like some other guys will talk about. But that's where I've kind of realized and how I feel about it.
well, it's all part of your development, as like you said, as a person, even more than a fighter. You've been a fighter or in combat sports for a long time. You were in amateur ranks, had 6, 7 fights in the amateurs
Yeah,
before you went pro. And I think, as far as identity and values go, to be good at your job and, you fight for a living, but to be good at your job is important. But like you said, if you lose in the cage like you've done, your day continues to go on, your life continues,
yeah,
just like anything. So really think that's a great perspective. You also started your pro career, both fights, both of your pro career were against 3-0 heavyweights. And even though 3 wins, doesn't sound like a lot, and it's still their beginning of their careers for Cam and Denzel at the heavyweight level,
Yeah.
anybody getting any type of win streak in the heavyweight division means they're putting stuff together. So I think you tested yourself off really hard out of the gates as new to the pro ranks, and like you said, as far
Mhm.
as losing, you sort of overcome that. And so, what are your thoughts on Anthony? He's 1-1. You're currently 0-2. What do you think about him as an opponent going into this fight?
Um, Nothing too much. I'm kind of at the point where like I can, I think I see his strengths and weaknesses as a fighter. From what I understand, he's more of a kickboxer. I think the thing about him is people kind of like look at him or they'll look up his record or something like that, and they kind of like I think will scoff at it. Either because they don't think it's very glamorous or he doesn't have this body type that people think. But I kind of disagree in the sense of like this is a guy that's actually fairly experienced,
Mm,
you know, and in the heavyweight division, they're going to hit hard regardless. And some of the scariest dudes are the guys I think of like Roy Nelson. You
yeah,
know, you look at that guy, that's the type of guy like you would see at a barbecue
sure.
and be like, I could kick that guy's ass, and then he's gonna like take your head off. So I look at it as it's a body type and a style that I think I'm fairly familiar with. I've dealt with before, and I've known the dangers because I've been on the wrong side of it before. So for me, it's kind of it's a problem that it's like you're experienced with this. Let's go out there and show your experience with this now. In terms of him as a person, I know nothing about it. Kind of doesn't matter. But in terms of what I see as a fighter, that's kind of like my take on it.
Yeah, you gave a great breakdown, and I think that goes a long way. Your mindset, the way you look at things, is important. What's your main training gym? Talk a little bit about your teammates, your coaches, kind of the people behind the scenes.
Yeah. I think I've kind of entered that stage now in my career where I definitely cross train a lot more. Um, and I think the big change, and I think why I feel actually very confident going into this bout is I have so many people supporting me and helping me out in different stuff. So, when I first started MMA, it was just my coach and I, and as we've grown and developed, we either new people have hopped on, or other things have interested me that I'm like, oh, I gotta start doing this. So like now I have obviously my main gym, Bower House, MMA, where I'm training with my coach, like Rob. We have a new assistant coach, Paul, working in who Paul is actually like durable enough for me to like hit. Like my coach is like an old guy. So he'd be kind of stuck in this dilemma where I'm like, oh crap, I'm gonna break this guy if I kind of go out too hard. But now we actually have somebody who I can actually just wail on as much as I want. I have a boxing coach now. My physical trainer and I have, I think, now entered, I think, our second year of working together, and like we've hit a groove. I'm not joking when I say this. Um, I always have to make things harder for myself. That's kind of a thing about me. George St. Pierre would always talk about how valuable gymnastics was in his
Yeah.
training.
Hmm.
And I went, yeah, fuck it. He's one of the greats. Let's do that. So I started tossing on gymnastic training a few months ago where I came in and I was like, listen, dude, like I'm like 6'6". I weigh like 280 pounds. I'm
Yeah.
not asking for like any miracles, but just get me to like a basic level of gymnastics. And I'm at like a Hills Gymnastics, which is a
Okay.
place in Rockville, which I didn't know it at the time actually when I started going there. But they've actually had some like fairly like Olympic level like guys train there before, and they threw me in the deep end basically. They're like, all right, let's start with like handstand like springs, I think they're called, or they put me on like the tumble bar. I'm still like learning the lingo where they're like, yeah, we want you to flip up and roll over this bar as it's hanging up in the air. I went, Okay, let's do it. So, it's pretty much it's a split between, you know, training MMA, which takes the majority of my time, some boxing, some jiu-jitsu, my lifting and like training, uh, like that stuff, and now gymnastic training. Um, which that sounds like a lot, and I just had the mindset going into it of like, well, listen, if you want to be a pro, you got to train like a pro. So it's 2 times a day, six times a week, 6 days out of the week. I always rest Sunday, you know.
Well, that also shows the pro training regimen. And you've said a lot, the mindset, and I think you said it earlier, the mindset where some fighters only train when they're in camp that doesn't work for you. I think in general, you
Yeah,
and if it works for a fighter, hey, but in general, when I was a coach, I saw that what ends up happening is mentally it's harder for people to take long breaks away from the gym that maybe
yeah,
get out of training or whatever. It's harder for them because their first 3 or 4 weeks back, it's just getting acclimated as opposed to continuing. So really
yeah,
love the reference to uh, GSP. I'm a huge GSP fan. And yes, that was
yeah,
not only something he talked a lot about with the gymnastics, but even when he was, in his mid to later 30s and was the longtime reigning welterweight champ, they would do those embeddeds, and it was a ton. Now, of course, he had worked up quite a bit. His height to weight ratio was a bit more of a
yeah,
gymnastic than
yeah,
you, but it would show him, and I certainly think it makes a lot of sense. I have to just ask you this question more for fun.
yeah,
You
yeah,
at 6'6", almost 300 pounds, looking like a grizzly bear, walking into a gym, which I imagine, 12-year-old, 80-pound girls
yeah.
that can do like 8 flips. What does that look like in the parking lot when you're walking in looking like you and
Oh
you've
my
got
God.
these? Did you think like, man, this is funny? Do any of them come up to you and like, are you gonna hurt us? Like,
Yeah.
what's their logic for you being?
No, I felt super, for being honest, I probably shouldn't say this. I felt super uncomfortable. I'm like, this does not look good. I was like, could somebody please come with me? That way, like, I don't look like a fucking like creep or something like
Right.
that. Like, I called before and I went like, listen, let me just explain the situation.
Right.
If you're willing to take me on, because they're privates and stuff like that. But actually, like when I went in, I think this is kind of like where the societal aspect of it comes in. I was super surprised when I went in how like normal it was, and I didn't get any second looks. Like I thought going in, they're gonna be like, "Ew, what the fuck? Get the fuck out of here!" and
Yeah.
like pepper spray me on my way like out to the car, you know. But like when I went in, they were saying like, "Yeah, no, like we have dads that will watch their kids for years and like have a beer gut and like,
And then want to do it.
yeah, they want to do it." And like I think my gymnast trainer was telling me like, yeah, I got a guy who like had a beer gut and like was 50 years old to do a splits in 2 months. So he kind of was like, that's something we can 100% do for you. And I have one training experience I really like telling people, which is it was when I was doing, I believe it's called the tumble bar, where it's basically you're hanging and you have to pull yourself up and get your hips on the bar, but like roll like over top of it. And it's essentially what gymnasts will do when they're doing like those swings where they go from the one tall bar to
Okay.
another one,
Those are
and
the
they're doing
uneven. Yeah. The
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 uneven ones, right? And
yeah.
that's how they get
Guys
up
do
to top.
parallel. I believe from watching the Olympics, guys have parallel only bars where they like
Yes,
get up. Ladies have the uneven, and
yeah.
you're on the parallel.
They put me on the lady shit. That's what they did,
There you
and they're
go.
like,
Why not?
and
There you
and I'm
go.
there, and they're like, yeah, you got to pull yourself over it, and I'm having a hard time. And they're like, first when they put me there, they're like, Kayla, show them how it's done, and then
Oh
this like
no.
10-year-old comes out and like does it easy because she's obviously done it since she's been like I don't know 3.
Great.
And I'm like, okay. And I'm struggling to do it for a period of like 15 minutes. And as I'm talking to my trainer, going like, dude, this is really hard. Like, please explain to me how to do this again. She comes up and goes, yeah, like comes up to me and goes, yeah, it's not working because your hips aren't getting close enough to the bar, and just walks away. Like, just like Mike drops that movement, like walks away. And I'm like, okay, fuck, I got to listen to this 10-year-old. So I took her advice and shock her, it worked. And she gave me like a thumbs up
Good
after,
job,
and then just
Kayla.
went back.
Good job,
Yeah.
Kayla.
And then
Yeah.
she like went back to doing like these like the like double pirouette, like triple
Sure.
spins and stuff like that. And it was hilarious because she was like, "You fucking idiot! Just get your fucking hips close to the bar. It's not that hard." And just
Well,
like that's how she said it to me.
well, you know what's interesting? You know, they talk, you know, me as a mental health counselor, they talk a lot in like the mental world about always
Yeah,
having a learner's mindset. And one of the
yeah,
things about cross training, whatever the cross training is, of course, GSP brought gymnastics to be very popular. I'm
yeah,
glad you're doing it because gymnastics has got to be one of the hardest individual competitive sports where it's just you. Swimming would
yeah,
also be hard, but gymnastics is obviously physics and very challenging. But one of the things about having a learner's mindset is fundamentals matter. And what's cool about Kayla is, and you know this from fighting, the hardest moves to learn in the beginning become second nature once you like,
yeah.
yeah. And so that's the thing. So when you're brand new, excuse, excuse me, well,
But
when you're brand new, the learning curve is very steep. At some point in gymnastics, just like in your experience with MMA, you are doing moves that you remember. Like I always used to teach people a jab, but I would always say like you're going to throw a jab 1,000 times before it feels good, because
yeah,
even though it's a simple movement, it takes a lot of repetition to get it flowing. Because we'll all see people that their jab, maybe they skipped over it because it's a lot easier to throw your power right or whatever your straight is, your cross. And so sometimes you'll see people that are fighting that have a very underdeveloped jab because of, just like Kayla pointed out, you got to get the fundamentals right. So now that you got your hips fixed, obviously you're on to
uh,
the next thing.
uh, we're kind of in the refining step
Oh
because
yeah.
like what I'll do is I'm successful at getting over the bar, but because I'm so long,
Mm,
I'll teeter
yeah.
over it. Like, getting to the full upright position is very difficult for me, and I kind of just like hang there, and I'll either fall forward again, or I'll go over. But like no, it's I was a little surprised how much progress I made because my mindset going into this is like, all right, dude, with the weight, with your amount of like weight and stuff, this is going to be like a brick wall for a while.
Mm,
But no, I've been surprised how much progress I've made, and if I had to say anything, is they are very complex looking moves that are actually very simple to do. And I think it's a very good analogy. Like the concept of like fighting, or for example, throwing a jab is not like a complex thing.
no.
It's just difficult to do, and it's once you kind of like get that initial like momentum going, I think you're a little surprised how much kind of speed you pick up in terms of like the skill growth set. And
Absolutely.
I I should also say that I was a little lucky. I think I did kind of cheat a little bit because my trainer is a big believer in like full body movements. So some of the stuff we were working did translate over. Like I went up to him and I said, "Hey, can I actually like I want to actually start looking more into gymnastics?" And he's like, "Well, you've kind of already done some similar things." And I was like, "Well, what are you talking about?" So, I had a little bit of a cheat step because I wasn't doing, I think, what most people do, where they're like, "Oh, I want to become a fighter. I got to get my bench press higher.
Right.
I got to get my squats higher." No, I was doing like body like bag lifts and these complex like jumping movements and stuff like that. My trainer, so um, I think really just I've had good help. I think that's why I think I've had success, and I think going back to your original question of like, well, tell me about like your training routine. I'm really at the point now where I feel like I have like kind of a village like behind me because I got a personal trainer, I got a gymnastics trainer, I got a boxing coach, I got a jiu-jitsu coach, I have my main coach. I'll drive down to Finksburg or Owings Mill to like work with my buddy Alexander Romanov, who's in the UFC. So I have a
Mm,
guy that's, ahead of me, MMA career, giving me feedback that I get to work with. So, I got this like laundry list,
yeah.
and I'm very thankful and I'm very grateful for that because I'm getting a lot of help. And some people, rather because of circumstance or personal decisions, do not have that. And I feel we've hit a point where my skill growth has developed very rapidly. Not because I've really changed what I've done. I still work as hard as I used to. I have a lot more help, you know.
Well, that
So
makes
that's
a lot. That really makes a lot of sense. You know,
yeah,
I'll wrap it up on this, Raiden. Thank you, obviously, for coming on the show again.
yeah.
It's
Thanks for having me.
been great. It's always great having you on the show. But I think it'll be a great opportunity for you to show on Shogun Fights March 30th. That skill development, like you said, there will be times of rapid skill growth. Can't wait to see you put it all together in the cage March 30th for Shogun. Thanks so much for coming on. You've been listening to Luke Payson with Pro MMA Heavyweight Raiden Kovacs. Thanks so much for coming on, Raiden. You have a great time and best skills to you March 30th.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Shout out to you, my coaches, all my sponsors, my new management team, Sucker Punch. They've been a big help. So thank you for having me on, and I hope to see everybody here at a Shogun end of the month.
Absolutely. Well, it's my honor having you on, and I'm glad you have the supports both in the sponsors and your management team, and obviously your coaches. So thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, brother. See you
You
later.
got it.